On May 23, 2025, President Donald Trump sent shockwaves through global markets with a single Truth Social post. The message was brief but explosive, instantly dominating headlines and sparking heated debate across the tech industry, Wall Street, and political circles alike. Trump announced his intention to impose a sweeping 25% tariff on all iPhones not manufactured in the United States. The move threatened to upend the smartphone market, raising questions about the future cost of devices and the fate of global supply chains. This was a direct and unprecedented challenge to Apple, the world's most valuable tech company. Trump demanded that Apple shift iPhone production back to American soil or face steep financial penalties, putting immense pressure on the company's leadership and business model. To avoid accusations of singling out Apple, Trump clarified that the tariff would apply to all similar imported devices, including those from Samsung and other major competitors. This broadened the impact, signaling a sweeping crackdown on foreign-made electronics. The president threatened swift and decisive action, warning that tariffs could be implemented as early as the end of June. This left corporations with little time to react, sparking urgent meetings and frantic lobbying efforts in Washington and Silicon Valley. The announcement was the latest salvo in Trump's ongoing America First campaign, a strategy built on using tariffs and trade policy to force companies to bring jobs and manufacturing back to the United States. Apple, which relies heavily on Chinese factories for iPhone production, suddenly found itself in the crosshairs. For Trump, the iPhone was more than a product. It was a symbol of American innovation that he believed should be made on American soil, by American workers. The announcement came at a time of escalating trade hostilities between the U.S. and its trading partners. It sent a clear signal that no company, no matter how powerful or iconic, was immune from the administration's aggressive protectionist agenda. By targeting Apple, Trump was making a bold statement. The era of unchecked globalization was coming to an end. The rules of international business were being rewritten in real time. The stage was set for a dramatic, high-stakes showdown between political power and corporate strategy, one that would shape the future of technology, trade, and the global economy. The market's reaction was immediate. Panic and uncertainty swept through trading floors as investors scrambled to make sense of the sudden shift. The air was thick with anxiety, and the ripple effect was felt across the globe. Apple's stock dropped 3% in a single day, erasing billions in value almost instantly. For a company of Apple's size, this was a seismic event, sending shockwaves through the tech sector and beyond. The S&P 500 suffered its first major weekly loss in over a month, as investors feared a broader trade war could be looming. The losses weren't just numbers, they reflected a deepening sense of vulnerability in the market. Companies with global supply chains braced for impact, realizing Trump's threat wasn't just about Apple. The uncertainty reached manufacturers, retailers, and logistics firms, all of whom faced the prospect of higher costs and disrupted operations. Trump had already pressured giants like Walmart and Mattel, demanding they absorb tariffs or move production stateside. The message was clear: adapt quickly, or face the consequences. This aggressive approach marked a sharp break from past administrations, which partnered with corporations rather than treating them as adversaries. The traditional handshake between government and business was replaced by a tense standoff. The Wall Street Journal even called Trump's tactics Marxist, underscoring the shock in the business world. For many, it was unthinkable to see such rhetoric aimed at the White House from the heart of American capitalism. The message was clear: loyalty to the administration's agenda now trumped free market principles. Corporate leaders found themselves navigating a new reality, where political allegiance could outweigh economic logic. Executives faced a new climate of fear and uncertainty. Boardrooms buzzed with urgent meetings, and contingency plans were drawn up as companies tried to anticipate the next presidential move. The threat to Apple was a warning shot to all of corporate America. No company, no matter how large or influential, was immune from the administration's demands. The cost of presidential tweets had never been higher. Each message could send markets tumbling, upend business strategies, and force executives to rethink their next steps. The business world was on edge, waiting for the next move, knowing that in this new era, a single tweet or policy shift could change everything overnight. While Trump tried to corner Apple, the company was already executing a long-term plan to reduce its reliance on China. Under Tim Cook, Apple had been shifting production to India, building a $1.5 billion component center and aiming to move all iPhone manufacturing there by 2026. This wasn't a knee-jerk reaction, it was years in the making, creating a resilient, diversified supply chain. By the time Trump issued his ultimatum, Apple was no longer solely dependent on China. The company's strategic pivot gave it operational flexibility and blunted the impact of US political pressure. A tariff on non-US iPhones would hurt, but it wouldn't force Apple back to American factories. Apple had already chosen its alternative, and it wasn't the US. The president's threat arrived too late to change Apple's course. When President Trump called for a US-made iPhone, the idea quickly ran into the hard wall of economic reality. The vision of assembling the world's most popular smartphone on American soil sounds patriotic, but the truth is far more complicated. Experts across the tech industry agree, manufacturing iPhones in America isn't just a matter of higher wages. The real challenge is that the intricate, highly specialized supply chain that makes iPhones possible is deeply embedded in Asia, where decades of investment have created a unique ecosystem. Analysts estimate that if Apple tried to build iPhones in the US, the price tag would skyrocket to between $1,500 and $3,500 per device. That would transform the iPhone from a mainstream gadget into a luxury product, affordable only to the wealthiest consumers. Dan Ives of Wedbush Securities summed it up best, calling the idea of a US-made iPhone a fairy tale, a dream that simply doesn't match up with the facts on the ground. The United States simply doesn't have the dense web of suppliers, nor the vast pool of skilled labor, that Asian manufacturing hubs like China and Vietnam offer. These regions have spent years perfecting the art of electronics assembly. Building a similar manufacturing ecosystem in America would require years of effort and billions of dollars in investment, with no guarantee that it could ever match the scale or efficiency of Asia's supply chain. Apple's current global system is a marvel of efficiency and coordination, honed over decades. It can't simply be uprooted or replaced by tariffs or political pressure. Even a steep 25% tariff on Chinese imports is minor compared to the astronomical costs and logistical headaches of moving production to the US. In the end, Apple's most practical move is to absorb some of the extra costs, raise prices where necessary, and keep its manufacturing base optimized in Asia, where the fairy tale of a US-made iPhone remains just that. A story, not reality. Apple was just one piece in Trump's broader tariff war, which defined his second term. Since 2025, the administration has used sweeping tariffs to force allies and rivals to renegotiate trade terms. In June, tariffs on steel and aluminum doubled to 50%, targeting even close partners like Canada. Earlier waves hit cars, semiconductors and films, affecting the EU, Mexico, and especially China. Trump also targeted the de minimis exemption, threatening e-commerce giants like Shein and Temu. The strategy closed every perceived gap in America's trade defenses. The Apple threat was part of a larger effort to force global companies to fit a nationalist economic vision. The battle with Apple was a microcosm of Trump's campaign to reverse globalization. Apple's response to Trump's threat was silence. No press releases, no public rebuttals, no social media sparring. This wasn't indecision, it was strategic. Tim Cook knew a public feud would only escalate the conflict and unsettle markets. Instead, Apple quietly continued its $1.5 billion investment in India and its plan to move iPhone production there by 2026. The company's actions spoke louder than words. Apple was already executing a strategy that made Trump's demand irrelevant. Cook's diplomatic, steady approach contrasted sharply with Trump's confrontational style. By refusing to engage, Cook denied Trump the public spectacle he wanted. Apple projected stability and control, reassuring investors and employees. The tariff threat became a manageable business problem, not an existential crisis. Cook's silence was a masterclass in corporate statecraft. Trump's tariff threat failed for several reasons. First, the idea of forcing Apple to manufacture in the US was economically impossible. Analysts had long dismissed it as fantasy. Second, Apple's proactive shift to India and other countries had already reduced its vulnerability. Tim Cook's refusal to engage publicly kept the issue from spiraling into a political circus. Apple's calm, methodical execution reassured stakeholders and blunted the impact of the threat. The administration underestimated the complexity of global supply chains. Tariffs are a blunt tool for a delicate problem. Apple had already started solving the challenge on its own terms. The threat was a simplistic solution to a complex global reality. While Apple weathered the storm, Trump's tariff war created widespread economic pain. Business confidence plunged, executive optimism dropped from 67% to 27% after the Apple threat. Companies like Procter & Gamble cut thousands of jobs, blaming rising tariff costs. Car makers hiked prices to offset expensive imported components. New car prices jumped 2.5% in April. Elon Musk warned tariffs could push the US into recession, a fear echoed by global partners. German exports to the US fell over 10% after new tariffs, hurting international relationships. Legal and diplomatic battles intensified, adding more uncertainty. Negotiations with the EU and India stalled, with both sides digging in. The result: rising costs, job cuts, and strained global ties became the new normal. The trade war's fallout extended far beyond Apple. The Trump-Apple standoff offers key lessons for the modern era. It showed that a global corporation with a long-term strategy can withstand nationalist political pressure. Apple's resilience came from years of planning and diversification, not reactive moves. Tim Cook's quiet diplomacy and strategic silence proved more effective than public confrontation. The episode is a warning to CEOs: have a plan before political threats arise. For US politics, it's a reality check. Presidential decrees can't override the hard math of global supply chains. The dream of bringing all manufacturing home clashes with economic facts and global interdependence. The tariff threat failed because it was a 20th century solution for a 21st century company. Apple's global reach gave it options and leverage. The standoff marked a shift. Governments set the rules, but global corporations now have the power to chart their own course. The aftermath of Apple's response to tariffs sent ripples far beyond Silicon Valley. Competitors and allies alike took note of Apple's playbook: quiet negotiation, supply chain resilience, and global diversification. Other tech giants began to reassess their own vulnerabilities, accelerating plans to shift production and reduce dependence on any one country. Gap-1.5s. Meanwhile, governments worldwide reconsidered the effectiveness of tariffs as a tool for economic leverage. Some policymakers pushed for more nuanced approaches, recognizing that outright confrontation could backfire in a world where companies often wield as much influence as nations. Gap-1.5s. For Apple, the episode reinforced a simple truth: adaptability is survival. The company continued to invest in new markets, nurture diplomatic ties, and invest in next-generation manufacturing technologies. The lessons of the standoff became part of Apple's institutional memory, a reminder that in an interconnected world, success belongs to those who can navigate both politics and profit with equal skill. Gap-2s. In the end, the Trump-Apple showdown didn't just change one company or administration. It set the tone for a new era, where global strategy and quiet resilience became the ultimate tools for weathering political storms. As the dust settled, industry analysts stepped forward to interpret the broader impact of the Trump-Apple standoff. Their verdict? The saga had redrawn the map of global business strategy. Gap-1s. Experts noted a clear shift. Multinational firms began to prioritize flexibility over tradition, investing in agile supply chains that could withstand geopolitical shocks. Gap-1s. Analysts pointed out that boardrooms across sectors, automotive, electronics, and even retail, were now asking new questions. How quickly could they pivot if tariffs were imposed? What relationships needed strengthening to secure vital components? The Apple episode, they argued, had made resilience a board-level concern, not just a logistical one. Gap-1s. Commentators also highlighted the growing importance of corporate diplomacy. As one expert put it, the boundary between politics and business is blurrier than ever. Those who can navigate both spheres will define the next era of global commerce. Gap-1s. Some analysts cautioned that while Apple had weathered this particular storm, the threat of future disruptions remained, requiring vigilance, innovation, and above all, adaptability. Gap-1.5s. In summary, the standoff had become a case study in business schools and boardrooms alike, a lesson in how companies, caught in the crossfire of global politics, could turn crisis into catalyst for reinvention. In the years that followed, the Trump-Apple tariff standoff proved to be more than a fleeting headline. It became a turning point for global tech companies. Gap-1s. The lessons learned reverberated across continents, shaping long-term strategies in boardrooms from Silicon Valley to Shenzhen. Gap-1s. Tech giants, once reliant on single-source manufacturing hubs, accelerated their efforts to diversify production and build redundancy into their supply chains. Gap-1s. Investments flowed into emerging markets, with companies seeking not just cost savings, but political stability and operational flexibility. Gap-1s. The standoff also ushered in a new era of risk management, where scenario planning and geopolitical forecasting became as crucial as product innovation. Gap 1S. Firms began forging deeper partnerships with governments, recognizing that diplomacy and advocacy were now integral to safeguarding business interests. Gap 1S. Ultimately, the tariff saga didn't just reshape Apple's playbook, it set a new standard for the entire tech industry. Gap 1S. As global tensions ebb and flow, the world's leading tech companies remain alert, agile, and ever adaptive, having learned that in a connected world, resilience isn't just an advantage, it's a necessity.